Welcome to today's episode, where we'll unpack the growing political attention on young men in America. It's striking how both parties suddenly seem fixated on the male vote, especially after recent elections. Why do you think young men have become such a focal point now?
Great question. The surge in young men voting for conservative candidates, over half of the male vote went to Trump, for instance, has politicians scrambling to understand and recapture this demographic. It's less about genuine interest in young men's issues and more a reaction to shifting voting patterns.
So, in your view, is this newfound concern authentic, or is it more about political strategy?
Frankly, it's mostly strategic. Parties see young men drifting right and respond by investing, sometimes extravagantly think of the 20 million hunt for a Joe Rogan of the left. But this rarely translates into substantive action for young men's actual needs.
That's a fascinating dynamic. Let's transition to what's driving these political shifts among young men. Masculinity seems to be at the heart of this conversation. How have politicians and influencers used masculinity to attract or mobilize young men?
Both left and right have politicized masculinity. The right often presents directness and toughness, think Trump or Vance's masculine virtues, co-opting them for political gain. Meanwhile, the left sometimes frames masculinity as problematic or seeks to redefine it, which can alienate young men.
That co-opting sounds powerful. Could you compare how each side's approach affects young men's sense of belonging?
Sure, young men who feel their masculinity is maligned or pathologized may gravitate toward groups that valorize it, sometimes in extreme ways. When one side offers authenticity and permission to be themselves, while the other seems dismissive, the choice can feel obvious.
Let's look deeper at how this intersects with broader societal issues like class and opportunity. Some argue the focus on men's culture distracts from class issues. Do you see masculinity discourse as a smokescreen for deeper economic divides?
Absolutely. The heated debates over masculinity often overshadow the class struggles that affect both men and women. When the narrative centers on saving young men, it can ignore root causes like job loss, wage stagnation, and limited upward mobility.
That's reminiscent of historical patterns using culture wars to mask economic problems. How might this play out in real life?
Take the manosphere online. It offers community and identity, but rarely solves the structural barriers like disappearing manufacturing jobs that young men face. Politicians talk about masculinity, but the real crisis is often economic.
Let's now turn to those economic trends and their impact on men. The labor market has changed drastically in recent decades. How have these shifts specifically impacted young and working class men?
Male-dominated sectors like manufacturing and construction have been hit by automation and offshoring. In the 1960s, nearly all men with a high school diploma could find stable work. Today, a third of them aren't working at all. This isn't just about individual choices, it's systemic.
That's a steep decline. Are women experiencing similar economic challenges, or is this uniquely male?
While women still face challenges, especially in pay equity, they've seen gains in education and white-collar employment. Meanwhile, men without degrees are left with fewer opportunities. It's a divergence that's widened the class gap even as the gender gap narrows.
This brings us to the question of whether men are simply falling behind or being left behind by society's structures. There's a debate over whether men are falling behind or being actively left behind. How do social safety nets play into this?
Many support program housing assistance, shelters, welfare skew toward women, especially mothers. Men make up 70–80% of the homeless, yet have fewer resources. It's easier for women to access aid, sometimes leaving men with nowhere to turn, even as they contribute significantly in taxes.
That's a striking disparity. Can you give an example to illustrate this?
Consider housing. Single mothers can often access subsidized rent, whereas single men are rarely prioritized. Studies show men are more likely to remain homeless due to these policy gaps.
Let's shift to education, where another reversal is taking place. The gender balance in higher education has flipped. Women are now about 60% of college students, once a male stronghold. What's driving the shift?
Multiple factors. Women have long outperformed men in high school graduation rate 7 in the 1920s. As colleges prioritized diversity and access, women surged ahead. Meanwhile, men especially from working class backgrounds are disengaging from academia, sometimes seeing it as irrelevant or unwelcoming.
Some claim women were always held back, but data suggests a more nuanced picture. Can you elaborate?
Certainly, while barriers existed, many women graduated high school and even college in earlier eras. They often prioritized family or faced glass ceilings in leadership, but participation was higher than stereotypes suggest.
How does this education gap shape the job market and social expectations today? Economic changes have redefined family roles. Is the traditional expectation that men provide for families still relevant or realistic in today's economy?
The expectation lingers even as it gets harder to meet. Many men internalize a provider identity, but with wages stagnating and dual-income households the norm, it's often unattainable. Yet, men still feel judged by themselves and others if they can't deliver that stability.
Some argue that women's economic independence undermines interdependence in marriage. Is losing that financial reliance a good thing?
It's complex. Financial independence can empower women, but research shows that women who out-earn their husbands are more likely to divorce. The shift disrupts old scripts, and both genders are struggling to adjust.
Let's examine how these pressures manifest in modern relationships and dating norms. In dating, traditional norms persist, like men paying for the first date even as roles evolve. Why do these customs endure?
They're symbolic gestures tied to notions of initiative and provision. Even men comfortable with a partner earning more often feel obliged to pay on a date. It's a ritual that signals interest and commitment, but it also reflects the ongoing tug-of-war between tradition and progress.
Is there a contradiction between men's willingness to accept equality in some areas but not others?
Absolutely. Many men say they're fine with egalitarian relationships, but social scripts lag behind. There's still stigma if a man can't provide a luxury lifestyle, and women, on average, are still attracted to higher-earning partners. These double standards fuel confusion and resentment.
Moving from the personal to the institutional, let's address how systems treat men, especially in sensitive cases like domestic violence. Men often report feeling dismissed or disadvantaged by institutions, courts, social services, and more. How does this play out in areas like domestic violence or custody?
Men face skepticism when reporting abuse, and the legal system often presumes female victimhood. For example, a man with visible injuries might get only a day's protection, while a woman's claim sometimes with less evidence results in longer orders. The burden of proof is uneven.
How does this affect men's willingness to seek help or trust the system?
It erodes trust. Men may avoid reporting abuse or mental health issues, fearing ridicule or disbelief. This institutional bias contributes to underreported male suffering, fueling feelings of isolation and injustice.
Which brings us to the mental health crisis among young men. Statistics show men account for 80% of suicides and 70% of overdose deaths. Why is the mental health burden so severe for young men?
Social stigma plays a huge role. Expressing vulnerability is often labeled as unmanly. Mental health services, from counseling to therapy, are feminized spaces where men may feel unwelcome. The lack of male role models in these professions compounds the issue.
How might we encourage men to seek help without feeling emasculated?
We need to normalize emotional openness as strength, not weakness. Initiatives highlighting male story, especially from respected figures, can shift perceptions. More male therapists and support in male-dominated environments would also help bridge the gap.
Let's discuss how the language we use, like toxic masculinity, influences these dynamics. The term toxic masculinity has become ubiquitous, but it's also controversial. Does it help or hinder conversations about men's behavior and well-being?
Originally, it described narrow, destructive norms like suppressing emotion or using aggression. But now, it's often deployed to shame or generalize about all men, which alienates those who might need support. Most men reject the idea that something innate about them is toxic.
Could the overuse or misuse of such terms actually drive men toward extremist spaces online?
Definitely. When men feel attacked, they may retreat to echo chambers, the manosphere where grievances are amplified and support is unconditional, albeit sometimes unhealthy. Constructive dialogue is vital to prevent this polarization.
As we near the end, let's look at possible paths forward for young men and society as a whole. Given the rapid changes in work, family, and gender roles, what might a healthier script for young men look like today?
A modern script should blend economic opportunity with emotional well-being. We need policies that address class disparities and open new career paths for men, such as in education and healthcare, alongside efforts to destigmatize mental health. Positive masculinity can mean resilience, empathy, and cooperation.
Are there successful models perhaps from STEM initiatives for women that could inform how we support young men?
Absolutely. Just as targeted programs boosted women in STEM, we need similar outreach for men in HEAL field health, education, administration, literacy. Closing gender gaps requires addressing class and culture together.
As we wrap up, what's the single most important takeaway for listeners on this topic?
Messy, honest conversations rooted in empathy, not ideology, are key. Only by listening to young men's real experiences can we craft solutions that work for everyone.